Hello and welcome to The Curator on Monocle Radio with me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Over the next 60 minutes, we'll be bringing you some of the very best interviews and reports from the past week of coverage here on our station. This week we'll report from Davos.
I think yesterday the main topic, and I fear it will stay that way, was Donald Trump's inauguration. And not only his inauguration, his whole politics. He made clear once more, very clear. And it stands in many, many ways very unfitting to what Davos should be about. It's just the other way around.
Plus, President Trump is sworn in.
There was very much a celebratory atmosphere among Trump supporters who had descended on Washington, D.C. from all corners of the United States, and I spoke to many from abroad as well, Irishmen, British, various people who had also descended on D.C. So no, really a celebratory mood, I have to say.
All that and much more in the next hour here on The Curator with me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. And we start the show with the biggest news of the week, Trump's inauguration. Monocle's senior news editor, Chris Chermak, was in Washington, D.C., reporting for us.
Andrew, as you can imagine, like many people, given that the festivities were moved indoors, I was with the various Trump supporters who had descended upon Washington, D.C., creating in itself quite an extraordinary scene for a otherwise liberal city, looking for places to watch for all of the festivities. I ended up in something of an institution in Washington, D.C. called Carmine's. It's an Italian restaurant and bar, and this was one of the sort of impromptu inauguration watch parties that were set up right between the Capitol and the Capitol Arena. So kind of what might have been the parade route or the way that Donald Trump was traveling. The parade or the motorcade route was right outside where I was. And I just kind of joined with other Trump supporters who were cheering, booing throughout the entire festivities on the television. And these are people who kind of streamed in because they could not get anywhere else. So in that sense, it was a good call, if I may say, on my part, not being able to get into the official festivities. Of course, so many didn't, which was the issue. So many people were just kind of roaming the streets that came into the bar afterwards saying, we've been looking around for hours. We weren't able to find a place. We tried many ones. We stood in many lines. In the end, they ended up watching it on television. That was unfortunately the only thing you could do.
Was there any sort of anger or even miffedness expressed by any of these people that they had spent a lot of money and come a long way only to find things moved where they couldn't see them and with no prospect of their hero giving them any of their money back?
You would hear it on occasion. There was some grumbling, some comments along the lines of, it's not that cold, but it was pretty cold. I'm going to say that sitting for a few hours, particularly if you're walking around, maybe you're okay. If you're sitting for a few hours outside, that would have been pretty dreadfully awful. So generally there was an understanding, and there was very much a celebratory atmosphere among Trump supporters who had descended on Washington, D.C. from all corners of the United States. And I spoke to many from abroad as well, Irishmen, British, various people who had also descended on D.C. So no, really a celebratory mood, I have to say.
And did you get a sense overall of what it was they were actually celebrating? I mean, with Trumpism, it's always unclear whether they are positively in favour of his policies and so forth, or whether they just see this whole thing as a means of putting one over on people they dislike.
No, I think there were a number of policies and different things that they were in favor of when you speak to many Trump supporters, to be honest. And you could go a little bit through that by seeing the kind of things that, watching the inauguration with them, where they cheered, where they were particularly happy, and where they were not. And we can go through some of the various policies that Donald Trump announced. But they were very positive towards, of course, his immigration policies, drill, baby, drill, and his sort of focus on energy and getting domestic energy and oil going again was a big one. His comments about there will be two genders from now on got huge applause. Also, I should say his comments on the military and kind of ending wars, that the military should be, judged by its success by ending wars or not getting into them. That was also something that people appreciated quite a lot. And naturally, his America First rhetoric in general, his announcement of an external revenue service to bring bring in tariffs, bringing back free speech to the United States. Another one that I think was quite striking to me because it went back a ways was his promise to give full back pay to anyone who had lost their job or not been able to work because of the vaccine mandate. That got a huge crowd response as well. And otherwise, some people I spoke to, one woman I spoke to was quite striking because I think she talked about the need for America to have a leader who is willing to offend. And she meant it in the sense of kind of the way that Donald Trump does, that, you know, everyone has been taking advantage of the United States for so many years. We need a leader who can bring, even for that matter, peace in the world by being willing to offend and do those things that nobody else does. So no, you really have people there who understand who Donald Trump is and want to see him do big things in the next 4 years.
Well, let's talk a bit about that speech then. How would you say it differed from his previous inaugural?
Well, you know, it's interesting, I have to say, Andrew, for a couple of things. One thing is I think it's important almost to say that yesterday was such an extraordinary day. And there were so many different speeches that you almost can't focus on the inauguration speech anymore because of the many comments he gave. After that, he spoke then to the overflow room right outside of the rotunda on the Capitol, where he gave more of a sort of open speech, which he said was a better speech than the inauguration speech that he gave. He then held an extraordinary session with reporters while he was signing executive orders, where he really looked comfortable in his own skin and talked about a number of different issues, and we can talk about some of those. But so I guess that what I would say is the inauguration speech was a very confident president, comfortable in his own skin, as he seemed to be throughout the day. He was holding back, though, somewhat in that inauguration speech. There was talk of unity. There were all these various announcements that he made on some of those policies that I talked about. I think the other thing that was striking, perhaps, was even in that setting, he was incredibly aggressive in attacking Joe Biden and the last 4 years, and then making sort of extreme promises about how everything would be completely different under him. That sort of contrast as he laid out his various policies, I think, was very striking compared to even 8 years ago. But just generally, I think the confidence that came throughout the day, whether he was speaking from, you know, a pre-done speech or his off-the-cuff comments, it just really came through for me that he really knows who he is at this point, like him or not. And he is happy with who he is and what he is doing in the White House this time around.
You are listening to The Curator on Monocle Radio with me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. And now we head to Davos, where global leaders, CEOs and the heads of NGOs all gathered this week in the Swiss mountains for the World Economic Forum's annual meeting. Gilles Carbonnier is the vice president of the International Committee of the Red Cross and an economist whose work focuses on providing humanitarian support to those in need and ensuring states uphold the Geneva Convention. Monocle's senior foreign correspondent Carlota Rebelo sat down with Gilles earlier in our pop-up studio in Davos to find out more about the challenges faced by humanitarian workers. She started by asking him what would make this year at WEF a successful edition of the annual meeting for the Red Cross.
Well, for me, as the Vice President of the International Committee of the Red Cross, of course, it's an opportunity to meet with both government and corporate leaders and to engage them on humanitarian priorities and on international humanitarian law. And what I have done so far is to participate in conversation on very fast advances in technology, especially artificial intelligence, and how this is changing warfare, the means and methods of warfare. And we, the ICRC, as the guardian and promoter of international humanitarian law, we want to make sure that states take the appropriate steps to frame and regulate these developments, and that companies are aware and contribute to make sure that these developments do not result in violations of the Geneva Conventions or international humanitarian law. They do not harm civilians, children, etc. in armed conflict, but to the contrary, that it contributes to greater respect for international humanitarian law. And then the other side is to see how we, as a humanitarian organization, can use some of these advances, some some of these technologies to be more efficient, more effective, and have more humanitarian impact when we try to, provide assistance and protection.
The issue of the impact of technology in modern warfare is fascinating. And I'm curious to hear from your perspective about the gray zones, if we can call it that way. Are we in a situation where some of this technology is not necessarily seen as not following the Geneva Convention and breaking international law, but is also not appropriate? So I'm basically really curious about that gray zone and how nations or militias manage to get away with it, with using it.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, typically we have a lot of these new technologies that can be dual use. They can be put to, for the greater good, put to use in medical appliances or, better essential services to the population. At the same time, they can also be put to use with nefarious objectives in mind. And I think that's where we have to make sure that we take preventive steps with states, especially, and also engaging the main actors, especially technology labs and firms, in order to anticipate and take measures to avert the worst from happening. And if you take the example of autonomous weapons, as a case in point, we see that there is a risk of having these autonomous weapons having unpredictable behavior, because as they keep running, they can suddenly start to take decisions with regard to targeting, with regards to attacks that have not even been imagined or planned for by humans in the first place. And for us, it is key to maintain accountability, predictability in these weapons, and also an element of human control, which is key also when it comes to life and death decisions.
And well, human control is key, but sometimes it can also be the cause, and most times it is the cause. And I'm curious about, we know that neutrality is key to humanitarian work, and we live in an ever more polarized world, and where everyone is taking a side. With everything you've been hearing and with all of your work and the people you've been speaking to, can organizations maintain neutrality? Can states maintain neutrality? How are we continuing to be neutral in humanitarian work when we are in such a divisive world?
You're touching on a critical issue and a very important point. For the Red Cross, for us, we have foundational principles of humanity, impartiality, neutrality, and independence. And neutrality, especially for the International Committee of the Red Cross, is key, because it's the only way we can then maintain and speak to all the parties to armed conflict and to offer life-saving services as a neutral intermediary between the warring parties. And for that, our favored modus operandi is confidential dialogue directly with each and every parties to the conflict. And we do understand that in a highly polarized environment, some people may wonder how come we maintain a dialogue, we maintain engaging with certain parties to armed conflict. But this is our role, this is our mandate under the Geneva Conventions, and it is absolutely key that states, as well as other stakeholders, work with us to preserve that neutral space for us to be able to offer humanitarian services and to save lives and to be a neutral intermediary when need be. So this is something we are working on, and as you mentioned, because of the heightened polarization we are seeing in many contexts, it's not an easy job, but it's a critical job that we continue to do and to engage states on.
And a key theme throughout the World Economic Forum this year is how we can reimagine our built environment through breakthrough technologies, from rethinking the materials we use in construction to lowering our carbon footprint. Bertrand Piccard, explorer and founder of the Solar Impulse Foundation, is one of the key players in the world driving this change. Monocle Stoneweb sat down with him before his keynote speech at the House of Switzerland in Davos to find out more about his hosted event.
It's a panel about the new solutions to build a sustainable habitat. Because today, buildings are still constructed in very old technologies. They waste a lot of energy. They have inefficient heating and cooling systems. The energy management is done today like it was done 100 years ago. So we have to modernize that. And it's not only for the environment. It's also for the quality of life. It's also for the business. If you save energy, you save money. If you save natural resources, you save money. At the same time, of course, you fight against pollution. So we see that there is a fantastic win-win opportunity between the people who build and the protectors of the environment.
Now, you say it's a win-win and there's an opportunity to make money. For those that have to make huge changes to their infrastructure, how can sustainable energy be profitable to them?
The renewable energy today, thanks to the critical mass, is cheaper than oil, gas or coal. Solar, wind, it's cheaper as a source of electricity. And then if you use it in an efficient way, for example, in a heat pump, instead of normal electric heaters, you also save up to 60 or 80% of energy. Then you insulate the building, you reduce the need of energy, and you save money. So at the end, it's not a cost, it's an investment. It means that you invest money, and you will recover more than what you have invested, which is the definition of investment. So it's wrong to say that it's expensive. It just requires an upfront investment, and this is something that some people don't have available. You have people who don't have the cash or don't have the credibility to have the upfront investment. And this is where we work now with the European Investment Bank and the Solar Impulse Foundation together in order to have a third player who will pay for the upfront investment and be reimbursed thanks to the energy saving and the cost savings of the client. And this is a way that will unlock the potential of efficiency, unlock the potential of clean technologies, because it will make it available for everyone.
And you say available to everyone. These are new technologies. How accessible are they? And these building materials, how globally accessible are they?
Today, it's available. You know, a company like Holcim, they have a product that is called Aerium. Aerium is a mineral foam that is made on site with the waste coming from the construction site. They used it in Algeria for public buildings. It saves 61% of the energy of the building. It's absolutely fantastic. You have Celsius, which is a heat pump manufacturer. They drill 180 meters down, and they install these heat pumps not just for little private houses in the suburbs. No, they install these heat pumps for skyscrapers in the center of cities. This is something really interesting. You have another company, it's a Swiss company, it's called Enerdrape. They recover the heat from subways, from tunnels, from underground parkings, which is wasted heat, but they use it to heat buildings in the cities. So we see that it's not only big technology, it's common sense. It is a way to be circular with the resources, circular with the economy, circular with the heat, instead of linear. If you are linear, you produce, you use, you throw away, and you waste. If you are circular, you produce something that can be used several times. Like, for example, the energy for the data centers. Instead of putting data centers in the North Pole, where they are cooled by natural air, you can put the data centers very close to a city, and the energy of the data center, once it is used to run the computers, it's heat at the end. You use it a second time to heat the city. It is free energy. It means you divide by 2 the cost of the energy because you use it twice. And this is the type of things where we have to change our mindset. You know, it's not a question of having no solutions available. It's a question of having the mindset to use the solutions that exist today.
Well, let's talk about the solutions that exist today, as well as you mentioned Switzerland. What is Switzerland's role as a country in developing such sustainable technology? And why is it left to Switzerland to be leading the force here?
You need leaders everywhere. Now, Switzerland is maybe a leader because other people didn't take the role of becoming leaders. And when you have a company like Holcim, who is one of the biggest producers of cement, and Holcim is working a lot to decarbonize the production of cement, to decarbonize construction, to bring new materials like the area mineral foam for insulation of buildings. It gives a role to Switzerland, of course, but it's not Switzerland alone that can change all the built environments. We need to have a lot more people, a lot more countries, a lot more companies. And we start to see really good reactions elsewhere also. You have Bouygues, is a big construction company. They really want to build sustainable. That's interesting. You have Beckert. Beckert is selling a solution that I like very much. It's called Dramix. It's steel staples that are mixed into the concrete. So you can reduce the iron armatures, you can reduce the use of concrete. So you save money and you protect the environment. All these type of things, and then you put the solutions of energy efficiency of Schneider Electric inside a building. Well, it becomes really sustainable.
Well, we can't have you on The Globalist without talking about aviation, and particularly quite an exciting announcement that you made in 2024 about the round-the-world hydrogen flight. How are plans and preparations for that going?
It's not a dream anymore, it's a real project, because the plane is under construction. We have one of the fuselage ready, parts of the wings ready, the rest is molded in the next months. And we should have all the pieces put in place by the end of this year.
UBS is a global financial services firm with over 150 years of heritage. Built on the unique dedication of our people, we bring fresh thinking and perspective to our work. We know that it takes a marriage of intelligence and heart to create lasting value for our clients. It's about having the right ideas, of course, but also about having one of the most accomplished systems and an unrivaled network of global experts. That's why at UBS, we pride ourselves on thinking smarter to make a real difference. Tune in to the Bulletin with UBS every week for the latest insights and opinions from UBS all around the world.
And we're back with The Curator, a weekly highlight show here on Monocle Radio, and I am Fernando Augusto Pacheco. And continuing in Davos, let's talk now to the editor-in-chief of Handelszeitung, Markus Dienmeyer, on whether or not WEF still matters.
The start yesterday, what is maybe most different than other times is the weather. It's just quite warm. For somebody who is used to very warm temperatures, it's still cold, but not for somebody who is used to Davos temperatures this time. But you're right. It's not about the temperatures here, or if temperatures, then in another way, in the temperatures in the world economy, in the world politics. I think yesterday the main topic, and I fear it will stay that way, was Donald Trump's inauguration. And not only his inauguration, his whole politics he made clear once more, very clear. And it stands in many, many ways very unfitting to what Davos should be about. It's just the other way around.
It's interesting that you put it that way, because Davos and the theme this year and throughout all the themes over the past 55 editions is essentially about collaboration, one way or another, with something as the priority or other, but it goes down to cooperation. And I guess what you were alluding there regarding Donald Trump's, presidency, which is now in full effect, is that it's more of a policy of isolationism and looking inwards. And how does that go hand in hand with the spirit of WEF?
It doesn't go hand in hand at all. It's the contrary. I mean, it's almost a little bit the tragic irony to have this WEF under the line of cooperation again, in a cooperation in an intelligent age. I mean, the age is not intelligent and there is no cooperation, and there is almost always less cooperation. I mean, you are right. Trump says when everybody is only caring for himself, is egoistic, then it's best for all. I mean, this is not really working. But he did that when he was here last time in his first round as president.
And he will be addressing the Congress Center tomorrow, Wednesday, via virtual link. Do we have any idea of what we might be hearing, or is it still all shrouded in mystery?
I mean, I would never dare to know what he will say because he's very good in surprises. But I'm quite sure he doesn't change his big steps. I mean, he will make clear once more how important the US is, and that everybody, especially the business leaders here, the best they can do is to invest in the US and to start business there. So this was his message always until now. Maybe there is another surprise. I would be surprised if it's something we could be cheer about. I don't think that will happen.
With everything you've said, it's almost inevitable not to ask a question, but do you feel like, does it still make sense to have this gathering? Does WEF still make sense?
I think the question is, there is good reason to put this question. But to be honest, I think yes, it makes sense. Because just when you don't have cooperation on the world, you have to be happy about every occasion where people talk to each other, where the big topics of the world are discussed. Even if they don't find a solution, this is not really to expect that some rich or powerful people just find the solutions together. The world is too complicated. But at least that this still happens, has worth, is important. Yeah, therefore, yes.
And Marcus, I wanted to focus on the report that your publication has done, and that's on the surrounding effects of the World Economic Forum and, the ramifications of a week that takes over the entire town, that takes a while to prepare, so it's not just this week, but it has a huge impact. And there was some quite interesting findings there.
Yeah. First, I'm happy you read our newspapers, and I would recommend that to the other readers too, listeners too. Yeah, that's a big thing. I mean, this is the bad side effects of the WEF. I mean, you have very, very high prices here for rental, for the people live here. That means sometimes even people cannot stay. When they make a new contract to live here, they have to sign. They leave the place when the WEF is there, because the landlords can just make much, much money just in this 1 week. That it's a big part of the whole earnings for the whole year. And then you have this very heavy traffic here. I mean, you have so many limousines here. There is no space on the roads for all these limousines. Yeah, and I think I have the feeling when I got in contact with the people here and they see my badge here, the WEF badge, I feel they are not very happy to see me because I'm just part of what they think is bad for them. But to be honest, the other way around, I mean, Davos, I don't know what Davos would be without the WEF. Yeah, it's really true. For the people who really live here, it's something they have to carry about. It's not easy for them.
Now, today is not officially the first day, but the first significant day with a full agenda that has been in play. And really, when we start to hear some of the very big speeches. So as you look ahead to, the next coming days where 24 hours at WEF feel like 72, how is the week shaping up for you? And what are some of the things you're looking out for while you're here?
Okay, there are two things I'm looking at. The first is really talk to people. People I always met here, and I want to know how is your feeling. I really want to get the mood and what they think, how bad the situation is. We had so many times all these written articles about the bad mood at the WEF, and in the end people were not so unhappy. And this is possible now too. Maybe people are happy because they can do the good deals, even when the world situation is not so nice. I'm interested in the big politicians too, not because I expect a solution, but because I want to know on what they stress, what they think is important. And I have some ideas what will be, like the Europeans will stress how important it is to have cooperation, because they are very weak at the moment. And the Americans will tell just come to us and do the business with us. Something like that. Zelensky will I wonder if he makes some hints, if there is really a possibility for a ceasefire. Yeah, and I think those two things. I'm interested in the lines between, in the big speeches, but I'm most interested in the talk to the people, also to the managers, how they really feel about the situation. Not when they are on the record, but when they are off the record, because then they are more open.
And now to the world of design. This week's On Design include dispatches from the most recent edition of Maison Objet, held in the French capital. Amongst a dazzling array of wares shown on the trade floor was the launch of products in showrooms across Paris. Nivar was amongst them, and the first upholstered collection from Phantom Hands, a furniture maker based in Bangalore, India. The set was made in collaboration with the Swiss design studio Big Game. We join Monocle's Paris bureau chief Simon Bouvier as he visits the Phantom Hands showroom in Montmartre. There he met the brand's co-founder Deepak Srinath to find out more.
It started with exploring a quilted material for the sofa, but soon we figured out that quilting wasn't appropriate, and there were several brands around the world that did a far better job of quilting than we can in India. And then our eye fell upon a ubiquitous cotton tape called Nivar that is found in India and used as sort of weaving material for daybeds. It's used for multiple applications. It is considered a very common, not very expensive material, and certainly not something that one would consider as a luxury material. The whole concept, we wanted the sofa to be rooted in India and specifically in this case rooted in Indian fabric and textile history. The sofa has an outer shell which is made by sewing together these Nivar cotton tapes into a hard jacket of sorts, and the inner warm cocoon of the sofa is made with soft, luxurious linen. You have this contrast between the harder, coarser cotton and the soft linen. The incredible skill that our fabric collaborators brought into this project involves dyeing the cotton and linen yarn and to make it look similar, which is incredibly tough to do.
And you've been so successful at it, they look identical, even though the materials of the outer shell and the inner linen cocoon, the color matching must have been a bit of a nightmare, but you were real successful. It comes in 3 colorways, doesn't it?
It comes in 3 colorways. There's a deep, rich forest green color. Then we have a blue, and we have a gray. Because the cotton and the linen have to be paired together and controlled, those are the only 3 colorways in which we offer these products.
And you collaborated with a Swiss design house to bring this piece into the world. Tell us about that collaboration a little bit.
So Big Game, they're based in Lausanne. By sheer coincidence, they visited our workshop in 2016 when we were really small. At that point, we had, I would say, less than 10 carpenters in the workshop. Elric, Gregoire and Augustin came down and saw us, and we really liked them. We liked their work, but it was too early for us to explore a collaboration with them. Cut to 2022, we had recently set up an upholstery division in Phantom Hands, and we were looking for a collaborator to produce an original collection of upholstered furniture. And immediately we thought about Big Game, and we had been following their work over the years. And we went to Big Game with a specific brief to create an upholstered collection. We gave them a few starting ideas. They happened to see the quilted packing cotton bags that we used to ship our furniture, and they loved the idea of creating something using the same quilting method. And that was how the collaboration began with Big Game. But as I've said earlier, the idea of making a quilted sofa didn't quite pan out. After a few months of prototyping, we discarded the idea. By chance, Aparna, the co-founder of Phantom Hands, discovered Nivar tape in the studio of our fabric collaborator. It was just hanging on a wall, and she picked it up and brought back a few meters of this tape, and then she cut them into smaller strips and sewed them together to make a cloth out of these tapes. And initially she created some cushions and bags out of this. When the Nivar was sort of, at that point it wasn't called the Nivar sofa, but when the Big Game sofa project hit a roadblock, she remembered this Nivar tape that she had and proposed the idea of a collection with this to Big Game.
And it even gave the collection its name. And kind of roots it in India as well, because it's so common there.
It uses the sort of hand sewing techniques that we're good at in India.
We're talking earlier a little bit about the the kind of Indian furniture consumer versus the international market. How do you see that evolving these days?
10 years ago, there were very few buyers for our furniture in India. By and large, the luxury or the affluent Indians preferred buying Italian brands, more ornate, more heavy furniture. That has changed. In the last 3 years, India is our fastest growing market. I think Indian consumers are very well traveled today. They are exposed to global trends. They're moving away from traditional heavy furniture. There are brands like us who make more minimal, simple furniture, becoming quite popular in India. I also see a lot of interesting young Indian furniture brands emerging. While at Phantom Hands, we managed to sell to the global market first, and then India sort of discovered us. I think now, I'm sure globally we will see more interesting Indian brands emerging in furniture. They've established a toehold in India and are now looking to expand internationally.
We're back with the curator. And it is January. Perhaps that's why we're doing this item now. Monocle contributing editor Sheena Rossiter takes us to a new zero-alcohol bar in Edmonton, Canada.
On the west side of downtown Edmonton, some drinks are being mixed at a newly opened bar.
My name is Joanne Pierce. I am co-founder and CEO of Spilt Zero Proof, which is Alberta's first mocktail bar.
Spread across the black wooden bar, Joanne, who's one of 3 co-founders of Spilt Zero Proof, begins to mix one of her signature mocktails. The 80s-inspired space is snug. It's decorated with velvet powder pink bar stools with gold accents, which complement the dark green wood paneling on the front of the bar and the black and white tiled floor. Bursts of neon pink light fill the space from the bar signs, and even though not a drop of alcohol is served here, for Joanne, it's important that the space still resembles a good night out.
I wanted it to feel like a bar. I was a drinker. I know what a bar feels like. We wanted to help set the tone and lead the way, and that it's about flavor. It's not about deprivation. It's not about making 5-calorie drinks that have full adaptogenic function. We eventually found this little 300 square foot space in a hair salon.
For Joanne, it's been a journey to get here, both personally and professionally. She started making mocktails somewhat accidentally. It came during a time of change during the pandemic.
I just quit drinking on a whim, which makes it sound easy. It wasn't, but it was just a very sudden decision. I woke up one day feeling a little bit embarrassed. You know, like the shame over. I hadn't done anything bad, but just woke up being like, I don't want to feel this way anymore. And stopped drinking. But Andrew still drinks, my partner, and I wanted something to sip on at happy hour. And so my instinct was to boil everything in the house and turn it into simple syrup. A very witchy instinct, which I'm told is not normal. And I just started smashing all these syrups together in these really unusual combinations because there was no rules at the time. It was kind of the Wild West. This was in 2020. So I would do things like spruce tip and arugula syrup and, you know, with muddled kiwi and creating these lovely little potions and taking pictures of them, which was a hobby. And I put them online and all of a sudden we got traction and realized, hey, like nobody was taking up space in a meaningful way here, taking it seriously.
Alcohol-free bars are more than likely going to start to be the norm. The popularity of alcohol-free drinks has been on the rise since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2020, global alcohol sales dropped by more than 6% due to restrictions on socialization and the closures of hospitality venues. But it's also generational. Gen Z, the people who were born between the late 1990s and the early 2010s, drink 20% less than other generations did at their age. And other generations are seemingly cutting out alcohol for health reasons. Recently, south of the border in the United States, the U.S. Surgeon General has called for cancer warning labels to be put on alcohol bottles, saying that there's no safe level of alcohol consumption. And Joanne is seeing this cross-section of people in her clientele at the bar. She says that Spilt acts as a safe space for the queer community and for others who feel safe with no judgment of choosing not to drink.
even in 2020, it was still a time where we would tend to pathologize anybody who wasn't drinking and immediately assume there was something wrong with them. So I didn't want everybody in my life to assume I was an alcoholic, even though I was drinking too much. But the reaction wasn't that at all. It wasn't judgmental. It was 100% supportive. People were really curious, and we realized there was just this whole untapped world that people weren't taking very seriously.
Joanne's venture into mocktails wasn't streamlined. At first, she made some cookbooks, but people found the recipes to be too complicated. She then started to collaborate with a local bitters company called Token Bitters. That is what helped her grow her business. She worked with them for 2.5 years, and she discovered where her strength lies. It's with the drinks and education.
With the bar, I don't owe anybody a recipe that's simple, like with the cookbooks. I also don't owe anybody shelf life. It doesn't have to be stable for 6 months at room temperature. The bar is really the perfect combination of everything. It allows us the flexibility to be creative, to be inspired by what's growing in the garden. And if we only have 10 portions of something, because that's all the garden made, that's it. Here we also have a chance to talk about some of the other exciting products that are out on the market, not just our own.
And here at Spilt Zero Proof, along with her 2 fellow co-founders, Joanne is putting those more complicated recipes to work.
My name is Andrew Paul, and I am a co-owner of Spilt Zero Proof.
Andrew, who's also Joanne's life partner, takes us through what's on the tasting menu for today.
We've laid out 3 different alcohol-free cocktails for us to try today. We have our Under the Apple Shrub, which is a apple, cardamom, Jerome, and whiskey little number. Then we have our Prairie Berry Patch, which is made with our house-made Prairie Berry Amaro that features locally sourced choke cherries, Hazcaps, and cranberries with some lovely Noah Amaretto. And then over here we have one of the bottled products that Joe brought to market through the partnership with Token Bitters, and this is a Hazcap Citrus Chili Sangria that we'll actually be doing in the style of a mimosa.
And as Andrew and Joanne have been coming up with these drinks, they explain, since there's no alcohol in the drinks, they think of them as an extension of food when bringing them together with all their flavors.
Mocktails are essentially an extension of food. So you can take the flavor profile of a dish and you can pull out certain components of that. And the question that we always come to the bar with is, how can we make this into a drink? So in the case of the Hazcap Citrus Chili Mimosa, the duck sauce, had cinnamon and Hazcaps and star anise, allspice, shallot, garlic, of course. So we pulled out the shallot and garlic and started playing with sort of its base spice components and the berry, and it's turned out to be an incredibly popular menu item for us here.
So what does that Hazcap Citrus Chili Samosa pair well with?
Goes very well with duck. It has a nice sharp kind of tartness to it, so it cuts through anything that has a lot of heavy fat. So duck, for example, maybe some short ribs would be nice to kind of cut through that, the fat cap on some big old steaks.
After trying 3 different mocktails, the drinks that were presented to me were all reminiscent of everything from a walk in the forest to a unique twist on sweet and spicy. And for Joanne, that's exactly the point. Non-alcoholic drinks aren't boring. People just need to come with an open palate and mind. For Monocle Radio in Edmonton, I'm Sheena Rossiter.
And finally on The Curator, let's talk about the 97th Oscar nominations. Very exciting. Here are my takes on it.
Fernando, good to have you here.
Good to be here as well after this amazing list of nominations today.
And we will get to this amazing list, but we did want to start with why they've only come out today. There was a delay because of the LA fires. What did the Oscars say about that?
Well, of course, and Chris, this year's ceremony, I think, will be they will have to talk about the fires, because most people in the industry, and I believe even some of the actors, some of the big names that we might see at the ceremony have been deeply affected. So it's unavoidable unavoidable. And even today, during the nomination, the program they had, that was the first thing they said. So I think we'll be hearing a lot about the fires in this year's ceremony, and I think that's fair enough.
That is fair enough, so we will hear a focus on that. But let's move on to the nominations. And Faye, I'm going to start with not the big ones, because let's be frank, I was upstairs with you, and I know that there's only one you really cared about. So tell us about that.
Well, I was jumping up and down. I'm Still Here, of course, the amazing Brazilian film directed by Walter Salles, picked up the nomination for Best Foreign Film. That was expected, but also for Fernanda Torres for Best Actress. She's the second Brazilian to be nominated. The first one was her mother, for a film also directed by Walter Salles. So that's amazing. And for Best Picture. And you know what, Chris, this reflects on how the Oscars are becoming international, because even the most nominated film of them all, Emilia Paris, with 13 nominations, it's a French production. The language of the film is Spanish. Do you know what I mean? So it's becoming very normal to have international auteurs, nominated for Best Director, for example. I think that's a very positive thing about the Oscars.
It is a positive, and it is a change, isn't it? The fact that so many foreign language films as well are being nominated. Tell me a little more about Emilia Perez, which did get the record 13 nominations, as you mentioned there, obviously also going for Best Picture. What's your sense of this film? It's gone kind of back and forth over the last few months or so, but nonetheless, as you say, the fact that it's also an international showing is pretty significant.
It's very significant, and it's not just the fact that it's international, but the fact that it's a bit of an odd film. It's a musical about a trans character, mobster from Mexico. It's very difficult to define. It was directed by Jacques Audiard. Of course, the film has people, you either love it or hate it. Funnily enough, I'm in the middle for this film. But nevertheless, I think it's a brave film. I think it's very original. I think the Academy is loving the film. There's been a little bit of a backlash. I think some people in Mexico don't think the film portrays the country in a very nice manner, among other things. But, I would say that it's one of the favorites to win for Best Picture.
You were saying earlier as well, and perhaps Emilia Perez fits into this, that you feel like the Academy is taking risks in a way that maybe it hasn't before. Tell us about that.
And one film that defines that as well, not just Emilia Perez, but The Substance, directed by Coralie Fargé, also from France. It's a good year for French directors. 2 of them are nominated in the Best Directing. I don't know if you've seen it, Chris, but it's a gory film. It's the music is loud.
I don't really go for the gory films.
Oh, it's super gory. It's funny. It's a satire, but also at the same time quite feminist. And Demi Moore, I think, is one of her best performances ever. She's been, of course, nominated for Best Actress. The Oscars would never nominate a film like this in the past, but this time it has 5 solid nominations in the big ones. Picture, directing, actress. So I'm very happy with the Academy. There's some years that I come here and say, wow, they're a bit boring. Kind of, we all knew which film was going to win. But this year is a little bit unpredictable, and that's a very good thing.
Well, and I don't know if this is predictable or not, but just to ask about the 2 films that may have the second most nominations, also kind of interesting mix. The Brutalist on the one hand and then Wicked on the other. I mean, that does show that there's quite a breadth this year of styles that are being nominated in the Oscars.
Which is also great. And of course, we know that the Academy loves musicals. But it's been a while since 2 proper musicals have been nominated in the Best Picture. We have here, of course, Emilia Perez, Wicked, with 10 nominations, which is a lot. And maybe, I'm not sure if I can define it as a musical, but A Complete Unknown as well had a great showing, which is Bob Dylan's biopic. Who knows, Timothée Chalamet could get his first Oscar.
Just finally, Faye, any other surprises for you this year?
There's one, I wouldn't call it a surprise, but I thought the Oscars were quite brave. Sebastian Stan for Best Actor for The Apprentice, where he plays Donald Trump, the current president in the U.S. I mean, I was genuinely thinking that the Academy was not nominating him, maybe to avoid controversy. But no, they were brave enough. And you know what? Fair enough. He is very good in that film. I would recommend. It hasn't been a success in the US. I think in Europe it did better. But who knows, after the Oscar nominations, people can start watching it again. And that's all we've got time for this week's edition of The Curator. The show is produced by San Impi and presented by me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Join us again next week, and thank you for listening.